Hello, puppies and kittens. I'm this episode of Blasphemers Bible is going to be brought to you by a sponsor. There we go. Yeah. Anybody wants to get
Harry Walls? That's right. Good old Harry Walls.
Gets out weird orange stains. There we go. Anybody wants to complain about me being political this close to the election? It's my fucking country. I want to save the republic. If you still can't figure this out, just go fuck off. All right. Anyway.
Hey, I'm friends in the States and I can't visit you because I prefer to have human rights. So
I like having a constitution and a republic.
Yeah, it's good. It's good when your neighbors don't turn into Nazis with nukes. So go Harris Walls.
And then declare that, you know what we need? Let's just have a dictatorship. And as they said in 2016, let's just burn everything down. Yeah, that's not the attitude we need to fix anything.
Well, at least we know that Margaret Atwood did get something right with The Handmaid's Tale, which is if they try and implement this, ladies, just come to Canada. Just come on. We have rights. We would love your help. Just come on.
Well, I don't know what to do with this because in my country, the people I was arguing just before the show, I'm arguing with some people about who telling me that I'm making it, that I'm spinning something or whatever. And so I put links to experts' commentary on this. I'm like, well, no, this is not me making up shit. This is, everybody knows this. If you don't, well, then you got a problem. And then the answer I got to that was, well, I don't trust experts. Yeah. Why would you trust people who know more than you do about the thing you're talking about? You should trust yourself on things when you've never studied and don't know anything about, because that's smart.
A blind raccoon could see how far America has gone down the path of fascism. Germany is in the history books. Even if you have whitewashed ones nowadays, you can Google.
Yeah.
Rise of fascism. How does it look?
I'm just stunned at the overwhelming stupidity, and I'm having on every side, everywhere. I'm seeing fantastic.
I agree
stupidity.
with you 100%. I felt that way all the way through October. Just stupid people everywhere. Doesn't matter which side you are. Doesn't matter if you're right or you're left. You are just at the extreme side. Stupid. I just can't understand how people can be so cruel, dumb, and stupid. Just insane to me. Just insane.
Now you just don't think of other people as human beings.
No, I get what Tsumura is saying. I mean,
yeah,
everybody. It's just why would you tell Musk that when you offer millions of dollars to get people to vote for you, why would you tell them that might be illegal? Why don't you just arrest the asshole, right? But no, why don't you just wait 4 years to prosecute somebody when we knew they were guilty 3 years earlier? I don't get it.
Do everything online, so it's
so
we can all.
Anyway, let's continue. Anybody have any opening comments?
Yeah, this is the chapter where Absalom dies.
Which sucks because I like him.
Which is
you spoiled the ending.
He dies in like the weirdest way too. So like, okay, we're not gonna spoil it, but yeah, it's a really weird way that he dies.
The next few chapters are really interesting.
It's a bit like Gwen's death in the Spider-Man, the second of the 3 Spider-Man iterations. It's a bit like that, where you're like, that shouldn't have happened that way.
Sorry, I only watched the Sam Raimi ones.
I will say that this death is not only weird; it's not really clear it's very weird, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, it sounds like
the next few chapters.
It sounds like something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad writing going on in the next few chapters. That's what I would say. There's possible that there's some stories it's based on, but it seems that someone has gone through and okay, no, we can't have this, and they had to change it, and then just made it really strange.
Just to clarify what Lawrence said, because I know this is the Bible, so what he said might be literally correct. It might be that they threw this guy Absalom out of a tower, and he didn't fall until he looked down and saw that he was up, and then He still didn't fall until he produced a sign out of his pocket that says, "Yipe." All right. Isaac, thank you for volunteering to read today.
Sure, I can read.
Thank you, Isaac.
So
Isaac,
I didn't get that haircut. I have my magic green screen hat on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good, because Isaac, just
I
to
have
remind you,
bad
short
hair
is bad.
I thought
I'm
you were
growing it
out here
out.
trying to look like the Wolf of Wall Street.
I'm taking your words, seriously. I'm trying to grow it out, but I've got that weird length where it's not long enough to sit back, and it's just like everywhere.
I get
look
you.
like a little young Einstein.
Just a reminder that Ara nearly cried when I cut my bangs.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 18.
Read through 18, the verse 18.
Oh, okay. Just scroll up. I went quite far. Here we go. So, chapter 18, verse 1. David mustered the troops who were with him and set over them captains of thousands and captains of hundreds. David sent out the troops, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. And David said to the troops, I myself will march with you. But the troops replied, No, for if some of us flee, the rest of us will not be concerned about us. Even if half of us should die, the others will not be concerned about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore it is better for you to support us from the town. And the king said to them, I will do whatever you think best. So the king stood behind the gate as all the troops marched out by the hundreds and thousands. The king gave orders to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, Deal gently with my boy Absalom for my sake. All the troops heard the king give the order about Absalom to all the officers. The troops marched out into the open to confront the Israelites, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. The Israelite troops were routed by David's followers, and a great slaughter took place there that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole region, and the forest devoured more troops that day than the sword. Absalom encountered some of David's followers. Absalom was riding on a mule, and as the mule passed under the tangled branches of a great terebinth, his hair got caught in the terebinth. He was held between heaven and earth as the mule under him kept going. One of the men saw it and told Joab, I have just seen Absalom hanging from a terebinth. Joab said to the man who told him, You saw it? Why didn't you kill him? Then and there, I would have owed you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. But the man answered Joab, Even if I had 1,000 shekels of silver in my hands, I would not raise a hand against the king's son, for the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai in our hearing. Watch over my boy Absalom for my sake. If I betrayed myself, and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have stood aloof. Joab replied, Then I will not wait for you. He took 3 darts in his hand and drove them into Absalom's chest. He was still alive in the thick growth of the terebinth when 10 of Joab's young arm-bearers closed in and struck at Absalom until he died. Then Joab sounded the horn, and the troops gave up their pursuit of the Israelites, for Joab held the troops in check. They took Absalom and flung him into a large pit in the forest, and they piled up a very great heap of stones over it. Then all the Israelites fled to their homes. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken the pillar which is in the valley of the king and set it up for himself, for he said, I have no son to keep my name alive. He had named the pillar after himself, and it has been called Absalom's monument to this day.
Yeah, so he gets his hair caught in like a tree or some branches.
It's not really it's not really clear if that's his hair. It says his head, not his hair.
Does it?
Yes, it says in verse 9.
Well, I mean, the verse
you
is
have to
head.
get a tree to get your head stuck in it.
Well, either way, like I have a lot of trouble picturing it, but if you have like some I don't know, the tree is like, you know, low enough down, right? The branches are low enough down that while you're riding on a donkey, you get your head stuck. Like he's not
But that's the thing. If you got your head stuck in a wedge, even if you were winded and knocked out, you would be able to get yourself down. You wouldn't just hang there waiting for your enemies to come and stab you and beat you to death.
This is why I'm saying it's like a Looney Tunes thing.
So
a tangle of hair.
Rashi says that he as he got caught his hair in the tree, he took his sword out to cut himself free, but he saw below him the pit of hell open up.
Yeah.
And how does Rashi
if he had
know
cut
this?
himself, he would
Because
have fallen in.
What Bible is he reading?
He was reading the Talmud, Sotat and B.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an explanation of why he didn't cut himself free. He was scared to fall down into hell. Yeah, it was like he had a hallucination.
Is that why it's the whole like stuck between heaven? Oh, it says stuck between heaven and earth, right? But which is a that's a very interesting
language, no?
idiom for that. Like I know, like I know that it's like he's like hanging there between something high and something low, right? But
that could have been part of
It's very interesting language to use for something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Literally, Rashi's comment is on that part of the verse.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well, apparently the ground was rock and the tree was a very hard place.
There is an opinion, but McCarter note. I have it in my commentary, but McCarter notes the GR Driver's suggestion that Absalom is trapped by the neck in a fork of crossed branches.
Yeah, that's kind of like the only way I could see it being like even plausible.
I still don't see it.
Well, you have to imagine you're fleeing for your life and your long hair is flowing behind you in the wind and you duck almost too late under a bunch of brambles because your mule is just running full out and your hair flies up and gets all entangled and it yanks you off, nearly breaks your neck, and then you're just hanging there by your hair.
Well, I think the idea is like, they're just like he gets it, caught like around his neck, right? Like the branches or whatever. But like, I don't know. I
like, is this Tarzan? And also, where did the Israelites get Ents? Because apparently more were lost to the forest than the sword. Where
I think the long-haired guys are having a hard time figuring this out.
Yeah, I think one of the things this might be, I'm not sure if it's a callback necessarily, or if it's just a prerequisite, I guess, or a prequel. Wasn't there that part in Deuteronomy that said, like, cursed is he who hangs upon a tree or something like that?
Yeah.
So,
though I don't know if that's it is actually. I guess
doesn't Paul also say that as well?
I'm sure that sounds like something he would say. Yeah. So
there is a thing with the tree in Deuteronomy 21:23, I guess.
Yeah. So that would be like I mean I could see this as being a condemnation of Absalom that way, but I could also see it the other way around. That because of this story, that would be a rule. But either way, that's a longer argument.
Admittedly, I'm not sure what the meme has to do with the young men, long hair, somehow that being his downfall.
Yeah, I think it was probably seen as like not necessarily narcissistic, but like vain. He looks after his looks and stuff like that, and he didn't. He went after the kingdom for his own personal self-interest or whatever. Like,
yes, obtaining actual justice and not letting his rapist brother rule. The bastard. How dare he?
Okay, I'll start first on verses 2 to 4. McCarter notes that some scholars, like Wolfwein and Langlamet, see these verses as secondary, as part of a pro-Davidic editing that the story has undergone, with Langlamet concluding that these verses were introduced by a redactor who wanted to emphasize David's absence from the battlefield. McCarter, however, regards this as part of the original account of Absalom's revolt. Likewise, Anderson writes that these verses are intended to explain why David was absent from the battlefield, and that there is no need to assume that a pro-Davidic redactor added these verses. On verse 3, you are worth 10,000 of us. Hebrew Bible reads, for now, ata with ein, there are 10,000 like us. Although this reading is attested in the Lucianic Recension and the Peshitta, Septuagint, Vulgate, Symmachus, Theodotion, and 2 Hebrew manuscripts, Kennicott 187 and 524, read ata with the aleph letter, reading you, i.e., for you are like 10,000 of us. This reading is favored by Rashi, Ditrani, and most modern commentators. Targum combines both readings, for now you are able to assist like 10,000 of us.
I don't know. It sounds to me a bit like an excuse. Like, and I get that, you know, Joab especially is going to be like, I actually need to kill this kid. And his dad's not, he's going to like wimp out on me about this. So no. Flatterers, get to work. Convince him to sit down and be all, you know, noble and shit. Appeal to his ego, which always seems to be a good way to go with men who are after God's own heart. Yay, narcissism.
On verse 5, Tsumura comments, David seems to have made the request out of purely fatherly love, or perhaps with also a feeling of guilt toward him, for the young man, in Hebrew na'al, is a term with an affectionate tone. But it seems unlikely that the narrator had an agenda of absolving David from involvement in Absalom's death, because unlike the case of Abner and Ishbosheth, hardly anyone would have criticized David, even if he had not tried to save him. On verse 7, 20,000 men. Some commentators take this number to be an exaggeration, or prefer reading Elef as a military unit. Thus, McCarter, who takes Elef to be a size of about 10 to 14 soldiers, writes that the losses were about 100 to 280 men. Anderson, however, writes that it is difficult to see what the numerical strength of the 100 unit may have been. Vitus Latina has 25,000.
You know, I kind of feel like because of verse 1, was it verse 1? Yeah, where he starts talking about setting commanders over people, thousands and commanders of hundreds. I feel like I could totally see the military unit be a reasonable explanation for this one.
It does make sense because he's fleeing with, you know, the soldiers who are loyal to him, but it's not by any account the entire military of the nation or anything. At least in the last chapter, he was, you know, fleeing for his life. So presumably they dug in and got together. It's not that there's more on David's side. It's that the soldiers are more experienced. The generals are more experienced. The leaders know what they're doing in war, which is the one area in which Absalom does not have any skills. Certainly nothing to rival his father's men.
On verse 8, the forest swallowed up more men that day. McCarter, quoting Ackroyd, writes that this metaphor intends to portray the forest of Ephraim as, quote, not an orderly tree-planted area, but rough country with trees and scrub and uneven ground, dangerous terrain for both battle and flight, end quote. Targum and Peshitta read, the beasts of the forest killed more people than the sword killed that day. This reading has found acceptance by traditionals like Rashi, Gersonides, and Ditrani. Kimchi suggested that the troops were injured by the trees when they fled the battlefield. Likewise, Josephus in Antiquity 7238 wrote that more died while fleeing than fighting. On verse 9, he was riding his mule. As noted in 1329, mules were the riding animal of royalty in David's time. McCarter, citing Alonso Schokel, writes, the symbolic force of Absalom's unmuling in the present passage ought not be overlooked.
That is true. They've mentioned royal mules several times up to now. It appears to have been, you know, the norm instead of horses at this period.
Yeah, we also get it later with Jeremiah too, and that sets up the whole Jesus thing.
I know, and that's just the most authentic of prophecies, where you say, it's time for me to fulfill a prophecy. Where's my mule? Yeah. Much real, very believed.
On that same verse, Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. Hebrew Bible reads, "And his head was held by the terebinth." The traditional interpretation is that his hair was caught by the tree. For example, Josephus in Antiquity 7239 wrote that Absalom, quote, "became entangled by his hair in a gnarled tree that extended far out with its great branches," end quote. Chazal in Talmud Sotah 10b taught, quote, "Absalom was excessively proud of his hair, and therefore he was hanged by his hair. Absalom took a sword and wanted to cut his hair to save himself." The school of Rabbi Ishmael taught, "At that moment, the gates of the netherworld opened beneath him," end quote. Although this interpretation has found acceptance among traditional and many modern commentators like Bressan, Herzberg, and McCain, the text doesn't explicitly state this, with only the head being held by the tree. McCarter notes G.R. Driver's suggestion that Absalom is trapped by the neck in a fork of crossed branches. He also notes Conroy's suggestion that the narrator attempted to connect this event with 1426, and intends the reader to, quote, "draw a contrast between promise and pride on the one hand, and humiliation and doom on the other," end quote. Tsumura notes that the traditional interpretation has led J.S. Ackerman to make the association of Absalom with the ram caught in a thicket in Abraham's trial in Genesis 22:13, but he calls it far-fetched. He further writes, quote, "Brueggemann, who uses a literary and theological approach, thinks that the text here is very difficult, and suggests that the, quote, obscurity may reflect the reticence of the narrator or the inability of the tradition to express what in fact happened, because it is so dark and ominous," end quote. But the Hebrew text here has no textual problem, and there is no reason why Brueggemann should say it is a very difficult text. The term head in Hebrew, as in Japanese, could stand by synecdoche for hair. So the explanation that obscurity may is utter nonsense. If such is a theological comment, one can do so only by reading one's own ideas into the ancient text without a solid basis. On verse 11, 10 shekels of silver. I just wrote that the Lucianic Recension, Josephus in Antiquity 7:240, and Forky Samuel A have 50 shekels of silver.
So I do. Okay, so going back to verse 10 real quick. So when the guy says that he saw Absalom hanging in an oak, so the preposition there, in an oak, would that be the same, like if you were to say like someone is stuck inside something? Like I got my foot caught in like a net. Would that be the same?
Yeah, but it's a common thing that in Hebrew the prepositions don't match up in the same way to the verb. So like certain verbs take certain prepositions, but they're not the same as in English. In English, you would still translate them as
no, sure.
Or...
I that I understand.
So
yeah,
it's the same preposition, but it could just be that verb to hang is always followed by
I see. Okay.
In rather than on. But
okay,
I'm not sure
the reason I ask is because like if that's the case, like then I could picture Absalom kind of riding on his donkey, and then he crashes into a tree, and then his head goes into like one of those holes that like something lives in. Because notice he doesn't say anything. Absalom doesn't say anything this whole time. Because surely if he had his like just his hair caught or his head caught, like he could still speak or something. But no, he's got his head inside this hole.
You're thinking Winnie the Pooh in the honey tree kind of a situation.
Yes, exactly. So if that happened, then like no one would hear him because he's got his head stuck in a tree, which is why I ask.
Or he can't open his mouth, or it'll be filled with bees.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it could be in, like, you have a tree with lots of branches. If you're in the branches, it's worked in English.
Yeah, if he climbed up into the tree.
Right, I get that, yeah. But like
to hide.
I was saying, like, if inside would also be an interpretation here, then it would. I don't know. Then the Winnie the Pooh explanation might stand.
I mean, his hair caught in the tree.
Aww,
it works in English as well.
Baby.
We wouldn't say hanging in a tree.
Hanging from a tree in a tree.
Yeah.
Either way.
But climbing into the branches, you would be in the tree. So it's I think we're over Anglophiling the prepositions here. It's exactly how they would describe.
Yeah, some of them are strange. There's more or less some verbs in Hebrew like you would follow with like the direct what's it called again? With like a et, the I don't know how you translate.
But it's
there's no translation for it.
That ancient Hebrew doesn't exactly align perfectly with English. That's
okay. I got to deal with these cats. Hold on.
I'm sure there's other languages.
Give them catnip and cuddles. Cats are the best thing in the universe.
I see a comment, Aaron. Maybe you want to read it?
All right. The comment is Jesus Tales says, Mark announces usage of these passages with a blind seer. Bartimaeus calling Jesus son of David. We have hung in a tree, exposing location, offered money, cursed he who betrays. Oh, so everything that I read that reminds me of another thing is therefore prophecy of that other thing. But it can't be prophecy because, one, it wasn't a prophet that said it, and two, there was never a time when anybody knew of any such prophecy. There wasn't a prophecy that at some point this thing will happen. We don't have any of that here. There was never a time when somebody was expecting this prophecy to eventually be fulfilled. This is just you retrofitting something that wasn't meant to be implied that way.
Or alternatively, this is a story full of memes and tropes because a literal retelling of history was not the way it was done back then. And the fact that the story of Jesus references so many similar memes and tropes is proof that it was never meant as literal history and was always theological. And Jesus is a myth, even if he existed, because the Gospels do not mean anything they say literally. So there's always that interpretation too.
Okay, on verses 12 to 13, Anderson comments, these verses give a negative picture of Joab. He is dealing perfidiously with David, and he would, most likely, leave his obedient servant in a tight spot had he killed Absalom. Compare Psalms 38:12, which is 11 in the Old Testament. McCarter removes the latter accusation by rendering verse 13b as, quote, and you were stationed some distance away, end quote. It is slightly odd that after Absalom's death, David, apparently, asked no questions as to the manner of his son's tragic end. However, we should not assume too much. It is not entirely impossible that Amasa's promotion was Joab's demotion, 1914, which is 13 in the Old Testament, and that it was part of David's punishment of Joab.
He does always resent Joab, too, and sets his son up to kill him when he dies. Spoilers.
On verse 14, 3 javelins. Talmud Sotah 9b reads, because he stole 3 times, committing 3 thefts of people's hearts. The heart of his father, as he tricked him by saying that he was going to sacrifice offerings, the heart of the court, as he tricked them into following him, and the heart of the Jewish people, as it is stated, so Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel in 15:6. Therefore, 3 spears were embedded into his heart, end quote. McCarter takes the javelins, in Hebrew shvatim, to be a bunch of stout sticks that Joab struck against Absalom, in order to dislodge him from the tree. He also notes Herzberg's opinion that the shvatim were darts thrust in Absalom's chest, which started a flow of blood that marked him for death.
Yeah, it looks like they did some sort of like, a bunch of people kill him together, so there's no one person that's like guilty,
Yeah.
Like the ancient Chinese tale where everyone takes a bite out of the guy and then you can never say which one killed him.
On verse 15, Talmud Sotah 9b reads, because he engaged in sexual intercourse with 10 of his father's concubines, 15:16 and 16:22, therefore 10 spears were put into him. End quote.
I don't know, kind of sounds like a Chad.
That's a super gay way to kill them.
Peter, something is
We're gonna penetrate him with our big erections.
Yeah, it looks like. Are we all gone?
Are we all gone?
Yeah, and on Peter's.
What are you talking about?
Hold on, let me see if I can.
That.
Let me see if I
can fuck some stuff up.
Nope. Let me see if I can fix that.
Like, are we still there?
We are still there.
I'm still seeing stuff on my screen.
Can you hear us, chat? Hey, chat.
Yeah, I guess you don't get.
They said we're audio only.
The audio only. There we go. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
in my case, that might be fortunate for them.
Are you kidding? We get the complaint that you don't talk enough because it is actually your show, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't. I mean, I have a face for radio, so.
Wait a minute.
Rubbish.
If you have a face for radio and I have the same face as you, that means I have a face for radio.
You can't see me.
You're all very handsome. Now stop it.
This is really weird.
Tell your wife.
Can't see me.
What if you go to the default view? What happens?
Oh, and Majestic Beck says you're beautiful, Aaron.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh, and Killa, the previous troll, is an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I'm glad they got out. I'm glad you got out, Killa. That's wonderful. They're a horrible, horrible cult. Where did the blue beard go? Exactly. Aaron, your blue beard.
It's still there.
Yeah, well, they can't see us because, you know, the magic of the internet is being all shitty and stuff.
That's it. I'm running a blue screen effect.
So should we just continue talking into the void without our facial expressions? And
I would think so. People don't really need to see us. They're going to go about their day doing whatever it is that they do. And
how will they survive without my radiant beauty?
All right, that's good that they can't see us because now I can get naked.
So can I.
Well, let me read the next comment here. Jesus Tale says, you misunderstand. As a fiction, Mark is suing prior fictions.
I think it's using
prior
fictions.
It looks like it says suing. Okay.
It does say suing, but that doesn't make any fucking sense.
All right.
I'm sure
Mark is using prior fictions to write his Jesus of Nazareth. Here is a tight cluster of things unique to Mark. Zechariah 9:14 and this text. You're ready.
You're reading.
This text you're reading. 9 through 14 and this text you're reading. Yeah.
I think
unique as in compared to the other Gospels?
Well, yes. In this case, it would be that. But I think Jesus Tales is right. It's tropes. He's stealing specific tropes. And trope in a trope.
A lot. I mean, don't we?
Gospel writers love doing
it all through the Bible, but we also see it in other, contemporary works, even from other nations. I mean, we see the same kind of thing happening all the time with storytelling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jesus is super tropey. That's why I'm a mythicist. Not because I believe it's, irrational that an itinerant minister went around claiming to heal people and got himself killed in a, politically tumultuous time by the Romans who don't handle that shit. It's because everything in his story is trope. It's all trope.
Yep.
So
I was impressed to find anything that Jesus did in his story that some other hero or God man hadn't already done.
And half of the teachings at least are stolen from the writings of the Pharisees, including the Babylonian rabbi Hillel.
Yeah, I think
explained this.
Both Hillel and Gamliel are mentioned.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
I was back in my neo-pagan stage. I was hanging with Forged Coven in San Antonio, Texas, and I was talking to their high priest, and his patron deity was Dionysus, Bacchus. And I remember talking about how Dionysus precedes Jesus by a good long way. He described himself as being the fruit of the vine, and he made a number of other statements that are just like you would think he was picking him right out of Christianity, except that he came first, like centuries earlier. The most recent work, or the first work about Dionysus, where he does all of this stuff, is like 430 to 500 BC, something like this. And then there's the passage where he turns water into wine, and he doesn't do it in the Penn and Teller illusion way that Jesus does. You pour water into a jug and you pour wine out of it. I've seen that done on Las Vegas stages. Now, what Dionysus did was cause the springs of the earth to spring forth wine, and now that's a hell of a trick.
It is good. And C.S. Lewis used it in Narnia. He used the Dionysus trick because it was so much better, despite the fact that he was doing like a fake Jesus ripoff. Dionysus, better trick.
So the argument I gave to the high priest of Forge Coven was this. I mean, I said either Dionysus, because why would God create Jesus to be a sequel of an already existing human idea that was just rampant throughout many cultures, right? Why would God make his story seem like a remake of all of these other stories? So either Dionysus really could turn water into wine just like Jesus did, or Jesus couldn't really do it either.
Yeah,
alternatively, God is a bad AO3 writer who steals way too many tropes.
Yeah, and sometimes the stories are so similar that people get confused, like during the Olympics. People saw the Feast of Bacchus and they were like, "Oh, it's the Last Supper." It's like
no, it's the fucking Olympics. It's a Greek thing.
It's the Last Supper.
How dumb as shit could you be?
Everyone knows that Jesus and the disciples ate a blue man.
Yeah. They did. Also, they ran around naked and competed for glorious wreaths. Of course they did. But we should probably get back to the Bible we're reading, and I'm going to get more coffee because I cannot handle David's petty shit without coffee. So,
Peter, can you, if you go to the default view of the StreamYard, does that work?
We'll just continue. They don't need to see us.
Hopefully, Peter figures this out and is not just sitting on his ass.
I am working on it. I think I found a workaround. For some reason, StreamYard doesn't let me capture the page anymore, and I have no clue why.
Because you've been a naughty boy.
I think so. That has to be it.
At least there's audio. Okay.
You live in the Netherlands. It's
all right, Tom, you wanna?
Yeah, I haven't finished my commentary.
And Peter cannot flash the T-shirt.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Can? Yes, that works.
Yeah, he can. Okay. Now I was in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 53, which reads, "Everyone who transgresses the commandment, honor thy father, is accounted as though he had transgressed the Decalogue. Therefore, Absalom was pierced by 10 spears." End quote. Anderson notes Herzberg's opinion that Joab's action was symbolic, but writes that it is unlikely. McCarter writes, "It is clear that Joab deliberately arranged for Absalom to die at the hands of an entire platoon, so that no individual, certainly not himself, could be named the killer." Yeah. On verse 17, a large heap of rocks. McCarter writes that this is, quote, "the burial of an accursed man," end quote, noting other examples of accursed people who were buried under a large pile of stones. You'll see in Joshua 7:26, 8:29, and 10:27. He further writes, quote, "Absalom is accursed as a fratricide and rebel, and he too was hanged on a tree," compare Deuteronomy 21:23. Mythically speaking, it is the fate of the rebel who would ascend the throne that he would descend into the pit. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, one could mention Isaiah 14:12 through 15, and the myth of the fall of Lucifer. In ancient tradition, the giants, in consequence of their revolt against the Olympians, are buried beneath huge stones, i.e. islands, and the rebellious monster Typhon, after being pummeled to exhaustion by the lightning bolts and hailstones of Zeus, compare Joshua 10:11 and 7:25, winds up buried beneath Mount Itana.
And here I thought they were in a massive pit with like electric bolts, a gate on top, like in the movie.
Yeah,
Hercules.
well, you know.
Yeah.
On verse 18, pillar, in Hebrew, matzevet. Tsumura notes that some scholars, like Gaster and Kasuto, compared the pillar with, quote, "the stele of his family deity," end quote, Sakan Ilibi, as in the Ugaritic cult of the dead. He writes, however, that while in the cult the stele is built by a descendant, Absalom set up his own pillar as a replacement for a descendant. Anderson writes that the pillar seems to have been an inferior alternative to the maintain of one's name by means of male descendants. 1 Samuel 15:12 and Isaiah 56:5.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like an etiology for some sort of pillar or structure that was in the valley, the King's Valley, but it's definitely not referring to the one that is now known as Absalom's monument, because that one was only built like in the
late Hellenism.
Yeah, like possibly like 300, but possibly more likely like 200s even. Yeah, late.
It could have been a replica intended to, bring back something that had previously been there, or
no. I mean, I think the one that is known as Absalom's monument now was definitely nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
It was built as like a monument to the grave next to it, but it must have been, they probably lost. Like, this seems to be an etiology that was written a long time ago for an existing pillar or something.
Right,
and then
right. I'm saying,
and then later on, it became an etiology for a different thing that was built even later.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But I'm saying that the second pillar could have, had something to do with trying to reclaim whatever the original thing, had been.
I mean, is it possible
that they were
this
honoring?
text is it possible that that verse, let's say, was written after 200 BC?
Probably.
Well, I'm not sure about the manuscript evidence, but the commentary in SBL says it was added by an editor to identify a monument known in his time to this day. The King's Valley, elsewhere called the Valley of Shava, in Genesis 14:17, may have been the name of a broad section of the Wadi Kidron. So the Kidron River, or the place of its confluence with the Valley of Hinnom. So
so it might not even be the same.
It might even be a completely different place. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, I can't get naked now.
Well, I mean, you could.
This is YouTube, not OnlyFans.
Okay, on that same verse, I have no son to carry on the memory of my name. According to 1427, Absalom had 3 sons. Talmud Sota 11a reads, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says, he meant that he did not have a son worthy for royalty. Rav Chisda said, it is learned as a tradition. Anyone who burns the produce of another does not leave a son to inherit from him, and he, Absalom, burned the produce of Joab. End quote. Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that all of his sons died, based on Targum, which reads, I have no living son to keep my name in remembrance. Josephus in Antiquity 7:243 writes, he called this his own hand, quote unquote, saying that even if his children should be destroyed, his name would remain on the pillar, end quote. Some commentators take the reference to Absalom having no sons as evidence that this verse is a reductional note. But others, like Smith, Kennedy, and Mauchlin, see the reverse, that this verse is primitive, while 1427 is late. Anderson, however, commenting on 1427, writes that perhaps his sons died young, or that they could have been put to death for Absalom's murder of Amnon. He writes that even if verse 18 was a later addition, there must have been some reason for the divergent statement. And
sounds like Joab pulled a Richard III style thing on them and then tried to erase them from existence, quite honestly.
And finally, on Absalom's monument, in Hebrew, Yad Avshalom, literally Absalom's hand. The claim that this monument exists to this day has led several commentators like McCarter and Anderson to see this verse as a late redactional notice, introduced to identify a monument well known in the time of the redactor who added it. Anderson writes that the King's Valley, quote unquote, is also known as the Valley of Shaveh, Genesis 14:17, but its exact identity is unknown. It has been identified as either the Kidron Valley or at the confluence of Kidron and Hinnom valleys. There exists a late Hellenistic tomb called Yad Avshalom in the Kidron Valley, but Tsumura writes that there is no confirmation that it sits on Absalom's gravesite. Auld writes, standing stones often have a phallic significance. Appropriate to this connection, the common Hebrew word for arm or hand, yad, can be used by extension to denote either phallus or memorial. Very effective play on this is made on Isaiah 56:5, where eunuchs
like his
have...
third hand.
Isaac, can you please listen to what I'm saying? Don't
I
interrupt me. This relationship sucks. Very effective play on this is made in Isaiah 56:5, where eunuchs who had been sexually damaged and hence, because of impaired yad, can endanger no son to continue their name, Shem, are promised a memorial, yad, and a name. It may be that 2 Samuel 18:18 is the only other text in the Hebrew Bible which so suggestively combines some of these associations.
Okay, Tomer, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Mr. E in the chat just called you John Cena. So he said you're the John Cena of the show. So, take that as
in
a
what
compliment.
context? I'm not familiar with.
They can't see you.
Yeah, so I put everyone back on screen, but yeah, the complaint in chat is that we still can't see Tomer.
But now Tomer cannot show himself because everyone thinks that he is a foot taller and that his shoulders are a foot broader. That he really is.
Tomer, do this. Do this.
I mean, no.
No, it's not working.
But it doesn't work. It doesn't work if you don't do that.
The best I can do is this.
Whoa.
Okay.
Have you been smoking? Was that a smoky room?
No,
sneak peek into
that's
Tomer's spaceship right there.
Tomer is mystified.
Also, Peter, I think you need to shift Aaron's box a little bit so you can see the full.
Oh yeah.
Is it missing an A?
It says Ron Ra. I'll fix that.
Yeah.
Even Peter can't get my name right.
Yeah. I mean.
Don't make me call you Aaron.
I think we should continue.
Yes, I agree.
All right, so we're finished with this chapter, right?
No, we're not.
Still on 19, right?
We're not. Isaac, please continue.
Oh, right. Verse 19. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and report to the king that the Lord has vindicated him against his enemies." But Joab said to him, "You shall not be the one to bring tidings today. You may bring tidings some other day, but you'll not bring any today, for the king's son is dead." And Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed to Joab and ran off. But Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, again said to Joab, "No matter what, let me run too behind the Cushite." Joab asked, "Why should you run, my boy, when you have no news worth telling?" "I'm going to run anyway." "Then run," he said. So Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain, and he passed the Cushite. David was sitting between the two gates. The watchman on the roof of the gate walked over to the city wall. He looked up and saw a man running alone. The watchman called down and told the king, and the king said, "If he is alone, he has news to report." As he was coming nearer, the watchman saw another man running, and he called out to the gatekeeper, "There is another man running alone." And the king said, "That one too brings news." The watchman said, "I can see that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok." So to which the king replied, "He is a good man, and he comes with good news." Ahimaaz called out and said to the king, "All is well." He bowed low with his face to the ground and said, "Praised be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." The king asked, "Is my boy Absalom safe?" And Ahimaaz answered, "I saw a large crowd when your majesty's servant Joab was sending your servant off, but I don't know what it was about." The king said, "Step aside and stand over there." He stepped aside and waited. Just then the Cushite came up, and the Cushite said, "Let my lord the king be informed that the Lord has vindicated you today against all who rebelled against you." The king asked the Cushite, "Is my boy Absalom safe?" And the Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rose against you to do you harm fare like that young man."
You should also read 19:1 because in the Old Testament, 19:1 is 33.
Oh, okay. The king was shaken. He went up to the upper chamber of the gateway and wept, moaning these words as he went, "My son Absalom, oh my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh Absalom, my son, my son."
A brilliant morning there for Absalom. So a couple things. One, it's interesting that the person that is off to go tell this news is a son of Zadok. So he's a son of a priest. There, this is a person the priest is saying then. And then secondly, the introduction of this Cushite. So Alter has a note on this. He says that this Nubian is the third foreign messenger introduced into the story. So the other two are the Egyptian slave who informs David of the whereabouts of the Amalekite raiding party and the Amalekite who reports Saul's death to David. Joab appears to exhibit a certain paternal concern for Ahimaaz, a priest and a faithful agent of David's during the insurrection. In the next verse, he addresses him as my son. Joab is keenly aware that David has in the past shown himself capable of killing the bearer of ill tidings in a fit of rage, and so the commander prefers to let a foreigner take the risk.
Although you'll notice that he knew Absalom was dead, and he made sure to say, "Oh, I left earlier. I didn't know anything about it," despite the fact that he left later and ran the other guy down.
Yeah, I think his little plan was quite clever because he ran ahead of him to like soften the blow. And then I guess the Cushite kind of
he got to deliver the good news, but didn't have to deliver the bad news.
Right, that's true as well.
Dirty pool.
Yeah, I mean we did see Ahimaaz being used or being designated as a messenger early on when the whole we're gonna go over here and like you guys stay nearby, and they had to hide in a well. So yeah, maybe he was a fast runner or something.
Messengers were in those days.
Yeah.
They trained.
I think his name. I'm not sure the name Ahimaaz. I don't think it means anything to do with running, but it sounds a bit like the ending of his name rhymes.
I think
Mat the word for running
means. I think Mat means wrath.
Yeah,
Uts.
yeah.
I mean, it can also be like derived from Uts, but I think according to BDB dictionary, it's my brother is wrath.
Wrath makes. Oh, that's
either way, though. He runs quickly. He's they trained messengers in those days to run quickly and run long distances. It was that was a skill, a talent you had to have. You trained it, you honed it. It was fleet of foot was a requirement for that position.
Okay, on verse 20, it is not clear why Joab did not want Ahimaaz to inform David of what had happened. McCarter wrote that Ahimaaz, being loyal to David, could not have expected to react favorably or make the official report in the positive way Joab wanted, in verse 32b. Anderson writes that verse 22 suggests that it was a matter of reward, but Gordon notes that David had an unpredictable attitude towards messengers, as we see in 1 verses 15 and 16 and 4, 8 through 12. Likewise, Auld writes that Joab thought it would be better to have a foreigner inform the king, who had an uncertain temper, about his son, rather than the son of a priest and one of David's trusted messengers. Tsumura, however, writes that messengers in the previously mentioned cases were involved in the killings. He further writes, Belgen surmises that Joab was concerned for Ahimaaz's safety, for Joab remembered David's treatment of previous messengers. But those who had announced Saul's and Ishbosheth's deaths also said they killed them. Perhaps, if rewards were given for good news, one might use less important members of a staff for bad news. But, as McCarter holds, quote, both Joab and the Cushite thought that the news was good and wanted the king to do so too, end quote. To think so too, end quote.
That being said, I think it supports my position about David and what an absolutely unhinged piece of shit he was. If his generals and those loyal to him are still stepping on eggshells around giving him news and no, we actually need you to survive. We'll send that guy. We'll send the red shirt, Dr. McCoy.
Okay, on verse 21, a Cushite. Cush is roughly identified as southern Egypt, Sudan, Nubia, or Ethiopia. Although early translations and KJV take Cushi to be his personal name, the use of the article the Cushite in verses 21 to 30 suggests that this was a designation. Kimchi wrote that either the Cushite was a foreigner who converted to Judaism, or that he was an Israelite, but because of his black skin he was called Cushite. Likewise, according to Birkei de Rabbi Eliezer 53, the Cushite was a Benjaminite, possibly based on Psalms 7:1. McCarter notes that some commentators, like Dorm and DeVoe, thought that his black skin was a signal to David of the bad news he was carrying. He writes, however, that both Joab and the Cushite thought that the news were good. He also writes that the Cushite being a Benjaminite is not impossible, since Cushi, father of prophet Zephaniah, was a great-grandson of Hezekiah, according to Zephaniah 1:1, and presumably Cushi's mother was an Ethiopian. Thus, he was both a Cushite and a Judite.
Good to know we have a little bit of racism in there. You know, what's the Bible without a bit of racism?
Wait, Judite or Benjaminite?
That he was Cushite and Benjaminite. Wait a minute.
I think he was referring to the other character. Or, I don't know.
Okay.
I think he wrote, if I did not miss that. No, I don't know. Okay. Maybe I did miswrote that. Okay. On verses 22 to 23, Anderson comments, in spite of Joab's arguments, Ahimaaz was determined to carry the news, and eventually Joab gave in. It is possible that the young man was indeed very eager for reward. It is usually thought that the Cushite took the direct but more difficult route to Machanaim, while Ahimaaz, aware of this, chose that longer but easier road along the valley of Lower Jordan. The text does not make it clear whether or not both runners took the same route. On verse 29, Ahimaaz's response in the Hebrew Bible is unclear. Quote, I have seen the large crowd, Hahamon Gadol, sending Joab the servant of the king and your servant, and I did not know. End quote. Bar-Efrat suggested that Ahimaaz's answer is evasive and confusing, but it could indicate embarrassment. He writes that Ahimaaz said that he has seen a large crowd when Joab sent the king's servant, i.e. the Cushite, and David's servant, i.e. Ahimaaz, and he did not know what exactly happened. Tsumura quotes from S.A. Meyer, quote, the ignorance of Ahimaaz would be a key narrative feature, yet up to the delivery of Ahimaaz's message, no clue to the reader of such ignorance even occurs.
On the contrary, Joab says to him, the king's son is dead. Don't take this message.
Yeah.
Like, literally the opposite. So he's lying.
He might not have seen it, but, like, you know, he knew.
And
finally, there's a few like outright lies in you know, in these chapters that are, you know, by righteous people or whatever. Maybe not righteous people, but like the good guys make it quite a few lies.
Every word of this is God breathed.
And finally on verse 33, which is
God sucks.
Finally on verse 33, which is
maybe that's why God's breath isn't that great. Whatever.
You done? Yeah. On 33, which is 19:1 in the Hebrew Bible, Tsumura comments, David, deeply moved, literally trembling with emotion, Ruth Resh Gimel Zayin, be agitated, went up to the chamber over the gate, Aliyat Hashar, to mourn for his son Absalom. In this regard, De Waard notes that in the ancient Near East, the funeral rites were usually performed besides the corpse or at the grave. But, quote, one stage in mourning, cultic or national or personal, might be passed on roofs, end quote. For example, in accordance with Ugaritic funerary practice, King Keret went up to the roof to make sacrifice to the god El. However, one cannot say that this is what is involved here. There is no mention of David's performing any rite. He is simply convulsed with emotion. He probably went to the gate chamber because it was the nearest place he could be private. Furthermore, the place he went to is described as a chamber as opposed to the roof of the gate by the wall in 1824. End quote. Chazal in Talmud Sota 10b explained why David said, my son, 8 times, in Hebrew, Bni. quote, 7 times he said, my son, by which he raised him up from the 7 chambers of Gehenna. And as for the other, 8th time, some say that David brought the head of Absalom close to Absalom's body, and some say that with this 8th mention, David brought Absalom to the world to come.
Wait, he wasn't beheaded.
Well,
maybe he was when they were done, or when they cut him down. But it's not in the text. But you never know; it could have been a tradition at some point. It makes some sense given the situation, and I just love the magic words and invocations. But remember, God hates magic.
And also, by the way, in order to count the 8 times, my son, you have to include this verse and like the next verse later on.
Yeah, Rashi in his comment on the Talmud Sota 10b writes that his head was thrown far away from his body, and they got it closer.
Weird.
Yeah.
Hard to recover from that.
Now for the ancient Christians, of course. So yeah, Cassiodorus, who lived in the 5th to 8th centuries, he writes that the manner of Absalom's death, suspended in the air as his neck was entangled in branches, prefigures the death of Judas. Yeah. And
just to be clear, that is only one of the ways in which Judas dies. There are 2 stories, right? There's one in which he just kind of falls over and dies, and there's another one where he hangs himself.
Well, yeah, but then the Christians love the hanging himself because then he's guilty and shamed, but they also want God to strike him dead. So it's really hard for them.
Is there like an opposite to the word prefigures? Like this story mirrors this older story?
Copies?
You mean post figures?
Yeah, like
Ignatius.
It's not plagiary, it's post figuring.
Ignatius, who lived on the 1st century, he writes that the fate of those who usurp the authority of their superiors cautions against contradicting one's bishop, as all authority ultimately resides with God. Go figure. Now, Salvian, who lived in the 5th century, writes, with the record of the Cushite... That's not his writing, actually. It's a summary. With the record of the Cushites' words, the divine witness of Scripture proves that God judges not only by deeds and by examples, but also by the very name and terms of judgment. Ambrose writes that having mourned the loss of his wicked sons, but not his dead infant, the difference in David's actions is explained by his hope in the latter's resurrection. And Augustine writes that, as David mourned the loss of his wicked son, and yet was consoled by the restoration of peace and unity his death brought, so the church responds to heretics who go out from its midst. Yeah, that's it.
So they shun you out of love, but if you just come back and admit that you were wrong and grovel sufficiently, we'll love you again. I swear, it's all out of love.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to 19?
There's a good comment. I don't know if it's put in the private chat yet. Jesus.
Well, I can't see it.
I'll copy it. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Jesus tales. Let's see. Both deaths of Judas are from these court tales. Ahithophel, kills himself by hanging. Amasa dies soon by being tricked by a false kiss by Joab, then gutted and left in a field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's true, yeah. Judas has multiple stories of how he died, and they both seem to come from from this part of the Bible.
Yep. So on chapter 19,
yeah,
Joab was told.
Just read up through, including 23, which is it's different in the Hebrew Bible, but yeah.
22.
Joab was told, "The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." And for the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning, because on that day the troops heard it said, "The king is grieving for his son." The men stole into the city that day, as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. The king covered his face and cried aloud, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now, go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now." So the king got up and took his seat in the gateway. When the men were told, "The king is sitting in the gateway," they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. Throughout the tribes of Israel, all the people were arguing amongst themselves, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hand of the Philistines. But now he has fled the country to escape from Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" King David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. "Ask the elders of Judah, why would you be last to bring the king back to his place, since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king in his quarters? You are my relatives, my own flesh and blood. So why would you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my own flesh and blood? May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you are not the commander of my army for life in place of Joab." He won over the hearts of the men of Judah, so that they were all of one mind. They sent word to the king, "Return, you and all your men." And the king returned and went as far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Barum, hurried down with the men of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites, along with Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and his 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was. They crossed the ford to take the king's household over and do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, "May my lord not hold me guilty. Do not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem." For the king put it out of his mind. "For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. I have sinned against you. But today I have come here as the first from the tribes of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed." Did I read past where you told me to stop?
No. Keep going.
Okay. David replied, "What does this have to do with you, the sons of Zeruiah? What right do you have to interfere? Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Don't I know that today I am king over Israel?" So the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king promised him on oath.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like this has happened a few times where, someone does something that they think is going to David is going to like, but then he's all like, "No, I didn't like that at all." And then it's always the narrative of like, well, someone's gotta die.
Yeah. Also, just a reminder that Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, is the brother of Joab. Yeah.
Yes, Abishai is the brother of Joab, and Amasa is David's relative. But this is a reflection of chapter 16, mostly. Because when David flees, you have this, all these characters coming out. Some curse him, some bless him, some support him. And now he's returning in triumph. And you see people's response to that as well. The people who cursed him being like, sorry, I didn't mean it. Also, here's all this practical help I'm giving you. So maybe you keep me around. Yeah. No killing. Yeah. And then, we'll see later what happens with regard to Mephibosheth, the son of
Jonathan.
Jonathan, yeah. Thank you. Brain blip. But we do need to look at that because it turns out there was more to the story. Because David was, at least according to the narrative, very kind to Mephibosheth, and I should have mentioned at the time how weird it is that he would be like, ha, David, but turns out not so much what actually happened.
But. Okay, now because there is an overlap between the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, when I'm saying verse 1, which is verse 2, I'm saying verses 5 to 7, for instance, in the Old Testament, which are 6 through 8 in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, just the convention. So I'll start on verses 5 through 7, which is 6 through 8. Anderson comments, "It seems that Joab has arbitrarily extended David's love for Absalom to all the rebels, and that he has interpreted the king's grief as hate for his own men and officers. One may also question the reality of Joab's ultimatum in verse 7, which is 8, which, taken at its face value, would be practically tantamount to another rebellion. Stoltz even assumes that in such a case, Joab would have taken over the kingship himself. However, this is rather hypothetical. It is possible that the negative representation of Joab is part of the fairly clear anti-Joab bias which characterizes the so-called succession narrative, at least in its present form."
Joab has fulfilled a very important narrative purpose in the story up till now. He's been the right-hand man of David. He's been his general when they were running around in the woods. He was Little John to his Robin Hood, or not the woods, the caves. Same shit. But he's been with him through all his things, but he's also been very close to him and willing to tell him, basically, stop being a dumbass. He's the one who's close enough to call him out on his bullshit, which frankly everyone in power does need that. But here we can see David is kind of done with him pulling those kinds of things. He also does things behind David's back. He does the dirty work that the king can't or won't or shouldn't publicly agree with. And it's something like when he killed Abner back when David was originally getting the throne. Abner had come over to David's side, so it seems like that was a bad thing. It seems more like he was protecting his role as general, which obviously at that point was still comparatively new in terms of being a literal general of an actual army that was, official and sanctioned and all that jazz.
Yeah, and then that pattern will continue. I think it's also that he seems to be written a bit as a scapegoat for David himself. So
very much, very much.
Oh, David didn't kill this person, or David didn't, stop a rebellion of his own son and kill him and order his death or whatever. It was all Joab's idea,
Yeah. And then Joab, and then David just couldn't possibly stand against Joab because he had too much position, power, something. But, we'll get him later in the narrative. Who's the pretty orange?
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of make sense I know it's just a bit of a story where David's like, oh, you can't speak to me like that. You're not general anymore. But then Joab gets the job back with it in his own way,
he does. Yeah. No. Yeah. And yeah, it's hard because Joab is not a particularly likable character, but he definitely serves a very important narrative function. Several, in fact. Who's the pretty orange? Do you have the brain cell today?
Okay. On verse 10, which is 11, Absalom, who we anointed to rule over us. It is not explicitly told that Absalom was ever anointed. Bar-Efrat suggested that this would be understood metonymically, i.e., we have made a king to rule over us. He writes, quote, "The people do not blame Absalom, but accept upon themselves the responsibility for the enthronement. Therefore, they should solve the problem created by the death of their leaders." End quote. Anderson writes that this may imply that David had ceased to be a king of Judah and Israel, and so a specific action had to be taken to restore David's kingship. On verse 13, which is 14, Anderson comments, "David's treatment of Amasa is of special interest. He not only forgave him for his part in the abortive revolt, but he also made him commander of the militia in the place of Joab." Compare 20 verses 4 and 5. It is unlikely that this command extended also over the mercenaries and the elite troops. Thus, it seems that Amasa must have been a man of considerable influence, perhaps even a potential candidate for the kingship. This may have been part of the price which David had to pay for the cooperation of Judah and their goodwill.
It definitely, several of his decisions here are very political, working with people who had worked against him, not because he necessarily is fine with it, but because in politics, that's what you have to do. You have to make peace and give position to your enemies enough to keep them working with you, but not so much that they can stab you again. So,
okay, on verses 16 through 18, which is 17 through 19, several commentators note that these verses create certain problems. Anderson writes that it is not clear whether both Shimei and Tzibah, together with their men, crossed the Jordan, or only Tzibah with his sons and servants. McCarter notes that Wellhausen correctly, quote-unquote, rearranged the texts so that the first clause of verse 18 precedes 17. On verse 20, which is
Isaac,
21...
is that you typing?
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's
My
okay.
computer's a bit like on a little pedestal here, so it's probably like, yeah.
Come on, man. Tinder can wait till after the show.
Okay.
We all know
it's
on
Grindr.
Yeah. Hey, get it, but you know.
Okay, on 20, which is 21, the tribes of Joseph, in Hebrew, Bet Yosef, literally the house of Joseph. This term usually refers to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Traditional commentators wrote that the house of Joseph refers to Israel. For example, Midrash Tehillim 3:3 reads, Rabbi Berachia said, "When Shimei came before David, he said to him, just as Joseph's brothers did evil to him, but he repaid them with goodness, so too I have done evil to you. But you should repay me with goodness, like Joseph who repaid his brothers with goodness, though they have done evil to him." Rabbi Yonatan said to him, "All Israel is called by the name of Joseph, as it is stated in Amos 5:15, perhaps the Lord God of hosts will be gracious unto the remnant of Joseph." And Shimei said to David, "All Israel has done evil to you, and I more than all of them. And all Israel is sitting and waiting to see what you will do. If you accept me, all Israel will come and make peace with you." End quote. Likewise, modern commentators take the house of Joseph here to refer to all the northern tribes.
That actually reminds me, I still want to do like a study on like the whole Joseph thing, right? Because we clearly have some layers that are earlier referring to a house of Joseph, but the Joseph story probably didn't come until later. So I still wanted
I'm
to do...
really interested in that because unfortunately, I wasn't here for those episodes. I want to know more about that. That's
if anyone's curious, I still want to do the study, like the full study on Joseph. But if anyone's interested in it's a pretty technical read. But God damn it, Kat. The book is called The Joseph Story Between Egypt and Israel. And it kind of changed my mind on the date of the Joseph narrative in Genesis. And it's very well argued.
Okay, and finally, verses 23 22 to 23, which is 23 to 24, McCarter notes that Viola sees these verses as secondary, deriving from the Deuteronomistic historian, since, quote, they provide a rationale for Solomon's execution of Shimei, compare 1 Kings 2 verses 8 and 9 and 44 through 46, which was lacking in the original text of the present passage as Viola conceives it, 19b through 21 and 24, by implying that David might have put Shimei to death on some other day, end quote. However, he follows Conroy's suggestion that, quote, within the story of Absalom's revolt, the case of Shimei is closed in this passage, end quote. He writes, quote, while there is no doubt that the author of 1 Kings 1 and 2 found support for Solomon's treatment of Shimei in the Shimei subplot of the story of Absalom's revolt, it is also clear that the narrator of the original story wanted to stress David's leniency and generosity towards the Benjaminite agitator. Nor would it be necessary for an editorial hand to insert verses 22 and 23 in order to point out the culpability of what Shimei did, which is not in doubt, or to illustrate further the ruthlessness of the sons of Tsumura, end quote.
I do think there's some validity to that idea of not killing him today, because there is certainly, there's a lot more superstition back in those days, whether in reality or writing the narrative, saying something like, it would be inauspicious to kill someone today. Like Sansa when she's dealing with Joffrey and, you can't kill him on your birthday. It would be bad luck. Maybe, So it's like, I could definitely see them trying to take advantage of any superstition available at the time to not get killed. Because
I would kill Joffrey on my birthday as a present to myself.
As would I, I definitely, I didn't even watch the show fully. I did not want to see the Red Wedding, but I did like seeing Joffrey die, as I think many people did. So well done to the actor. Very good job.
Who is Joffrey?
Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones.
Yeah, wrong fantasy novel. We need to be reading this one.
Yeah.
Almost as much incest, actually.
Yeah. Aaron, please finish this chapter.
Okay. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth? He said, my lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and I will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever you wish. All my grandfather's descendants deserved nothing but death from my lord the king. But you gave your servant a place among those who eat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king? The king said to him, why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take everything now that my lord the king has returned home safely. Barzillai the Gileadite also came down from Rogelim to cross the Jordan with the king and to send him on his way from there. Now, Barzillai was very old, 80 years of age, and still running for president. Isn't that amazing? He had provided for the king during his stay in Mahanaim.
Yeah.
For he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem, and I will provide for you. But Barzillai answered the king, how many more years will I live that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? What are you doing? Okay. I am now 80 years old. I can tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not. Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear voices of male and female singers? Why should your servant want to be an added burden to my lord the king? Your servant will cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance. But why should the king lead me in this way? Let your servant return, that I may die in my own town, near the tomb of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with the Lord the king. Do for him whatever you wish. The king said, Kimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him whatever you wish. And
Ken Ham shall cross over with me?
Shut up.
And anything you desire for me, I will do for you. Well, now that you mention it. So all the people crossed the Jordan, and the king crossed over. The king kissed Barzillai and bid him farewell, and Barzillai returned to his home. When the king crossed over to Gilgal, Kimham crossed with him. All the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel had taken the king over. Soon all the men of Israel were coming to the king and saying to him, Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men? All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, We did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you so angry about it? Have we eaten any of the king's provisions? Have we taken anything for ourselves? Then the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, We have 10 shares in the king. So we have a greater claim on David than you have. Why then do you treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king? But the men of Judah pressed their claims even more forcefully than the men of Israel. I'm thinking they ought to do the wisdom of Solomon here. If they got 10 shares of the king, they should just cut him out right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just chop David up into 12 pieces. Everybody can have a piece, and then he can stop murdering everyone.
I like the way this chapter ends. It's like, they said this, they said that. Oh, this one was better.
Yeah.
They prevailed. They won the dance off. Like, what happened? It doesn't say.
Well, it's just that, now that he's being returned to his position as king, David is the prettiest girl at the ball. And everybody's just fighting for his attention because he's so fabulous.
Yeah, I think it's...
Oh, sorry. Okay. On verse 24, which is 25, Mephibosheth's appearance suggests that he was mourning, according to Josephus in Antiquity 7:267, Ditrani, Abravanel, followed by Auld and Bar-Efrat. Although some of the details are unclear. Not taking care of his feet, in Hebrew velo asa raglav, could mean that he was either not cutting his toenails, according to the Septuagint, which reads, and did not take care of his feet, nor pare his nails, Gersonides, Bar-Efrat, and McCarter, or shaved the hair of his feet, according to Rashi, or washed his feet, according to Vulgate, Targum, and most traditional comment.
Was he a hobbit?
Shaved the hair of his feet, like was that a thing that people do?
I think legs.
Yeah, but still, I'm saying it wasn't like from a traditional perspective, like men, men aren't supposed to shave their body hair.
Well, and maybe some places, but why feet? Like, that's not, unless you're a hobbit.
Well, it's visible, I guess, but the interesting thing is it says his mustache wasn't trimmed, which is something that religious Jews, they still do. They grow their beards, but they do trim their mustache so that they can eat,
Oh no. Rashi is sorry. I misunderstood Rashi. He wrote that he was removing the hair between his legs.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
His ball hair.
Shaving his balls. Yeah.
Well,
he stopped shaving his balls when Daddy David wasn't there anymore.
Right. Yeah, he didn't have to anymore.
Nah.
He's like, I guess there's no reason for me to keep shaving my 25. Balls.
Well, I mean, he had a thing with his dad. Maybe he.
The removal of the hair between his legs.
Yeah.
It doesn't really explain it, unless it means whatever.
He was a femboy, so the reference to his mustache is unclear.
Well, he was crippled. He couldn't really run around a lot, so maybe he just stayed slim and a twink and didn't eat too much.
Yes.
Okay, the reference to his mustache is unclear, though it can refer to the beard in general, according to Peshitta, Vulgate, Abravanel, followed by Anderson and Tsumura. Anderson concludes that the narrator's aim is to stress Mephibosheth's grief at David's departure, and, quote, there is no hint in the story that his sorrow was nothing more than good acting, end quote.
Possibly. I mean, the thing is, if it's like, you know, like his beard was untrimmed or whatever, like you should be able to see, or his mustache was untrimmed, you should be able to see, like, kind of guess how long he's been doing it for. And if, I think the idea is that he's been doing it since David had left, which has been a while.
You can see that this isn't like Shimea, who's like turning on his heel when the fortunes change, but that he's actually been in a state of mourning for a really long time, because hair growth isn't something you can fake without, you know, really good add-ons. And I don't think anyone's going to be putting, you know, braiding in little extensions on his beard.
So he had a what they call those wigs for
a fake beard wig.
No.
He could have just got that from the Jehovah's Witnesses. They always use horrible fake beards for their
There's like wigs that people have for their what they called?
Yeah, well, I don't know if that was being checked unless David was like, how sorry are you? Let me see if you shaved your balls while I was gone. I'm sorry.
You guys are weird.
The text is weird. We're just pointing it out.
Yeah, the text is at fault. Okay. On 29...
a merkin. That's the word I was thinking of, a merkin.
You're the one who told us that the shaving of the hair between his legs was a part of his mourning, or not shaving, which...
It was Rashi, not me. Okay, on 29...
Yeah, I think the other commentators are more likely to just say that he didn't trim his toenails, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. Okay, on 29, which is 30, David does not decide if either Mephibosheth or Ziba are on the right, and decides to divide the property between them, overturning his decision to give it all to Ziba. McCarter writes that from verse 31, it seems that Mephibosheth spoke the truth, and David was persuaded by his sincerity, but still moved by Ziba's recent service. Bar-Efrat adds that Mephibosheth's behavior in verse 25, which is 24 in the Old Testament, spoken by the narrator, strengthens this assumption. According to Talmud Yoma 22b, when David said, "You and Ziba shall share the land," a divine voice, in Hebrew bat kol, came forth and said to him, "Rehoboam and Jeroboam will divide the kingship." On verse 35, which is 36, can I tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not? Hebrew Bible reads, can I know between good and bad? The phrase is a reference to, quote, what is pleasant and unpleasant, end quote, according to Anderson. Thus, Vulgate reads, are my senses quick to discern sweet and bitter? And Rashi, between good food and bad food. Chazal, in Talmud Shabbat 152a, wrote that Barzillai overindulged in sexual relations, causing old age to overtake him. Similarly, McCarter notes that in Genesis 3:7, sexual awareness comes with the knowledge of right and wrong, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, wisdom and understanding come with sexual experience. Thus, he writes that Barzillai's rhetorical question is, quote, a polite way of saying that he has outgrown his sexual powers, and that because of this, and the loss of his other sources of pleasure, he could not expect to enjoy himself in court.
So we should all bang our way to greater intelligence?
Yeah. We should have done that. On 37, which is 38, Kimham. Josephus in Antiquity 7.
Kenham, yes.
Maybe you should.
No.
No, I think you should.
In the Hebrew, it's actually Kimhan with an N.
Kimham
with an N at the end rather than an M at the end. But some reason.
I mean, there is another verse which is Kimhanna in N.
Yeah.
So it depends.
Oh, I see. Some places it says with an M, some with an N. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. On Kimham, Josephus in Antiquity 7:274, Peshitta, the Lusanic Recension, and Rashi take Kimham to be Barzillai's son, an interpretation accepted by Anderson, Auld, and Tsumura based on 1 Kings 2:7. The exact etymology of Kimham is unclear. McCarter notes that Knox derived it from the Arabic kamiha, quote, change complexion, become pale, end quote, and so takes Kimham to mean of pale complexion. Josephus and the Lucianic recension called him Achiman, perhaps reflecting Achinoam. Peshitta reads Benham or Benham, which McCarter takes to be a mistake.
And also, Jesus' tale was mentioned earlier on that the house of Barzillai is mentioned in Nehemiah or Ezra. I can't remember exactly, something to do with the house of Barzillai is rejected by Nehemiah Ezra narrative as they are considered married into the house of Barzillai. I don't know who they are. Maybe, yeah, I don't know enough about that bit.
Okay, on verse 40, which is 41, Anderson comments, Caird regards the and half the warriors of Israel as a foolish interpolation, since up to this point only the men of Judah had been on the scene. In view of verse 43, which is 44, it seems that the men of Benjamin, verse 17, which is 18, may have been reckoned with Judah. However, Kalai argues that Greater Judah included Judah and Simeon. The acceptance of Caird's view would make a better sense of the following verse, and the complaint of the men of Israel would have more force. However, there is no textual support. Perhaps half may mean here a fraction or simply some.
Yeah, it does seem a bit anachronistic that a lot of these stories seem to talk about the Judahites and the Israelites, like the two existing groups.
Which, when they're pretending that, this was before a divided kingdom, which, again, it's really complicated because in the later division, which we will see in the time of Rehoboam, it says that, Judah remained with David's house and Benjamin also cast in their lot with Judah. But in this point in the narrative, it doesn't make a lot of sense because Saul was from Benjamin and David replaced Saul, and there was obviously a lot of bad blood there. So you can see why there's an argument over which other is grouped with.
Yeah. This essentially uses the term, I guess, Israelites as in everyone else besides the specific ones we mentioned. But yeah, it's interesting.
Besides Greater Judah.
Judah and the Benjaminites are said separately as well because, as you said, they weren't part of Judah. So they have their own little storyline going on here.
Okay, and finally, verses 42 to 43, which is 43 to 44, McCarter comments, the details of the quarrel reflect differing attitudes towards King David. The men of Judah speak of the king as a particular individual, a man from Judah who is closely related to them. The men of Israel, on the other hand, speak of the king as the king, the particular man in office at present being of no concern to them. Thus, they claim a greater interest in the king, 10 shares for the 10 northern tribes to Judah's 1, and rights of seniority as firstborn, a reference to the time before the incorporation of Judah into all Israel. Now, I have only one ancient Christian, and that is Augustine, who said that David mourned Absalom's eternal punishment rather than his bodily death.
Yeah, of course he did, Augustine. Whatever you say, buddy. Fucking dope.
Did anybody believe that back then when this was written?
No.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we already saw the Jewish traditional interpretation of him saying 8 times "my son" to rise him out of the different stages of hell to speed up the process so that he go to heaven. But that itself is a much later idea as well.
Yeah, I'm done. I think
right.
Lawrence should read chapter 20.
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see, chapter 20. Ooh, Rebellion of Sheba. All right, here we go. Now, a scoundrel named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and cried out, "We have no portion in David, no share in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, O Israel." So all the people of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the people of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. David came to his house at Jerusalem. And the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to look after the house and put them in a house under guard and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Holy shit. Man, I forgot about that. Okay. Then, Cat, get the hell out. Oh, you piece of shit. Okay, whatever. Where the hell am I? Yeah. Then the king said to Amasa, call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself. So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed to him. David said to Abishai, now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities for himself and escape from us. Joab's men went out after him, along with the Kerethites, the Pelethites, and all the warriors. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were at the large stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist. As he went forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, is it well with you, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword in Joab's hand. Joab struck him in the belly, so that his entrails poured out on the ground, and he died. He did not strike a second blow. Then Joab, his brother, and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. And one of Joab's men took his stand by Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood on the highway, and the man saw that all the people were stopping. Since he saw that all who came by him were stopping, he carried Amasa from the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. Once he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-Maacah, and all the Bichrites assembled and followed him inside. Joab's forces came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-Maacah. They threw up a siege ramp against the city, and it stood against the rampart. Joab's forces were battering the wall to break it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, listen, tell Joab, come here, I want to speak with you. He came near her, and the woman said, are you Joab? He answered, I am. Then she said to him, listen to the words of your servant. He answered, I am listening. Then she said, they used to say in the old days, let them inquire at Abel, and so they would settle a matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? Joab answered, far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim called Sheba, son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, his head shall be thrown over the wall to you. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise plan. And they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, and all went to their homes, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Kerethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Shiva was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jerite was also David's priest. So that moved incredibly quickly. A few things, right? First of all, the whole leaving his concubines at home until they die, or in some other place until they die, fucking crazy.
That's again, biblical family values, way to treat women.
Yeah.
Hey,
well, they were forced to have sex with somebody else as a symbol of usurping his throne because he didn't think they were worth protecting and he needed someone to sweep. So they have to die alone, secluded away from all human contact.
Because that's what you always do, punish the victim.
Yes, that is the story of women with biblical family values. That has always been the story.
It's supposed to be like a royalty thing, like, so because they're the wives of the king, he can't really divorce them and then they marry someone else. That can't happen.
That would give them a claim to the throne, right?
Yeah, since they were raped, then he can't sleep with them either. So therefore, he has to keep them in the harem, but not sleep with them.
But like secluded and cut off.
And he also can't. He also wouldn't kill them, but instead he does this, which does kill them. But his hands, they don't technically have blood on them from that.
Well, I mean,
he says he looks after them, but it doesn't. Yeah,
until they die, which is really just life, I guess.
Well,
but if you're secluded and kept away in one certain place, that's not really.
Basically, they were given life in prison. I mean, it doesn't say that.
If you were a
feed them and let them
concubine
starve to death in the secluded area where he locked them, he could have simply secluded them and had them fed by eunuchs, but not have them be part of the household of the king. I mean,
why not let them be people?
Because women aren't people, especially not to kings. We're just uteruses that are, exist to designate men's power. It's like the concept of virginity, because some men thought that their penises were so important that contact with them fundamentally changes who we are.
The horror of historical harems is something. It's very deep. There's quite a lot in different cultures of how women were treated. In they were royalty, but they were also kind of slaves to the king. And in some places, if the king didn't want you, he could banish you, but he could also just put you to death if he wanted. So I think if you were a concubine, it's not like you love the king. This might even be an ideal situation where you don't have to sleep with him anymore.
And then the second portion of this story, which is the death of Amasa, it's very weird.
Yeah.
So they both seem to be on. So they're both on David's side, right? So is this so it seems like an accidental kind of death, right? Like he didn't notice the sword or whatever.
No, this was Joab was deliberately murdering him. This is exactly what he did with Abner. When Abner switched from Ishbosheth's side to David, way back in the in the beginning, when the one remaining son of Saul tries to claim the kingship, when Abner switches over to David, and he has the potential to become the general because he has actual experience as a general. Joab does the same thing. He meets him as a friend with one hand and stabs him in the back with the other. He does the same thing with Abishai, who David had just made general over him by demoting Joab. And, Amasa, for political reasons or because he was pissed over killing his son and ignoring his orders. Then, this again, it's like Defense Against the Dark Arts, teacher, you don't take that job because Joab will immediately kill you and take it back.
You know, because it is really weird. Because like at least the wording here, he was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist. As he went forward, it fell out.
Yeah. So the fact is that it says that he fastened it to his body, which is where your sword is supposed to like dangle down a bit so it doesn't get in the way. And it seems that he tied it to his body so that it would fall out into his hand without Amasa noticing. Seems to have been a premeditated trick.
Yeah, it was definitely he was securing it in such a way that he could drop it into his hand and stab him quick, as like the Game of Thrones with the the Night King and the.
Yeah, because it was really weird, right? Because it did kind of initially. Okay, so I guess having this kind of be, kind of masking it like an accident. Yeah. That would explain why, like, that was playing my confusion, because he also said that Job struck him in the belly, and then he's like, oh, he didn't need to do it a second time. I'm like,
yeah. Well, he struck him a mortal blow and then just left him to bleed out in the middle of the road and didn't even dispose of his body until the soldiers who were like, wait, wasn't that our general that David said?
No, I think it's the first. He struck him in the belly so hard that it killed him straight away, so he didn't have to kill him.
Right, no, I get that. But when it said, because like, the thing is where it's like, oh, it fell out, right? That makes it seem like an accident. But then in verse 10, when they say struck, that has a connotation of like purposeful, right? So,
because it fell out. And then verse 10 says, Amasa was not guarding against the sword that was in the hand of Joab.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Because it was a sneaky dagger drop kind of a situation.
Okay, and it could have been in his other hand. He took his right hand to grab his beard, which itself is an interesting thing. He grabbed his beard to kiss him.
Yeah.
Men with beards, do you like it when people grab your beard to kiss you?
Not really. What's funny is the other night while I was sleeping, my cat started like eating my beard, and I woke up and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing, stupid cat?"
Grooming you. Shut up.
That's not no. He's eating it. That's not grooming. So that was like, okay. So that was part 2 of the story. And then I could swear. So we have like this motif of like women in the city, like on the edges of the city, kind of helping out the army, right? Because we had that initially when they were first entering the land, right? Was that Is that what that was, or was that a different city?
You're talking about not the one in Joshua, right?
No, it was not the one in Joshua.
The judges, maybe the one she threw the stone.
No. I'm thinking of when they sent spies into this, like in the city, and there was this... Was that the name of the city?
No, it's the name of the woman.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Jericho.
Yeah, Rahab.
That's Jericho.
Jericho. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So we have that motif of kind of women along the edges of the city kind of helping out, and then again throwing something over the wall as well. So quite a few echoes of stuff we've read before. Also, what a plan. I mean, this also speaks to, or also reminiscent of the of Sodom and Gomorrah in a way, because instead of going into the city entirely, they kind of make a deal, right? So the army kind of acts like Abraham in this situation, where they give an option for like, okay, well, we won't go into the whole city, just give us this one guy.
And I mean, I think it's closer to the one where the woman threw the millstone down in terms of trope.
That too, yeah.
But you can see why she did that. It was a wise move, because this guy isn't even from their city. He just gets pissy because of political stuff, screams, "Let's all rebel," and then runs into their city with an army on his heels. She's like, "Hey, we're not freaking dying because you had a tantrum in a politically volatile moment. Like, yeet."
Yeah. Some people like to count the number of people killed by Satan and by God or whatever. Maybe someone should have a tally of how many people are saved by women, unnamed women.
Oh my God, I love you so much right now, Isaac.
Okay, I'll start on verse 1. Commentators note that Sheba's slogan is later taken up in 1 Kings 12:16. Anderson notes Driver's suggestion that this is a call to resume the old tribal independence. He writes, however, that the nature of the supposed organization is a matter of speculation. Auld comments, just as Israel's claim of 10 shares in David anticipates 1 Kings 11, so Sheba's call almost precisely anticipates the wording of Israel's rejection of Rehoboam on the death of Solomon. As usual, we should understand that Samuel is drawn on BTH, preserved here in Kings. The context here requires a rendering of Nachala more literal than possession. A family's Nachala, or Chelek, division, is its share, or stake, or holding, or portion of the whole land of its community. The portions of the whole earth have been allotted by the Most High, Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9. And Yahweh's own Nachala in 2019. Within them is Jacob or Israel. The fact that land holdings are frequently heritable has led, since the Greek Old Testament, to the rendering inheritance or heritage.
That is also really interesting because they do seem to kind of use the Benjaminites as a scapegoat throughout this entire thing. Not just with the war, but then with this as well. Right now, you have the Benjaminites kind of wanting to rise up against David because they're not getting shit from him. He doesn't care about them.
David doesn't care about black people or Benjaminites.
I would say just a defense of Joab. The story, it says that Amasa was like late or whatnot, and I think Joab might have seen that as like, here he's given this big job as general, blah blah blah. He's failed on his first job. Like, I have to do what's right for the kingdom, sort of thing. And replace him.
Yeah, right. Joab just stabs anyone who takes his job. That's why David lets him keep it eventually. Still sets up his son to kill him after he dies.
Okay, on verse 3, he had no sexual relations with them. Talmud Yerushalmi Sanhedrin 2:3 reads, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Pazi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, said, this teaches that David had them braided and adorned, and brought them before himself every day, and told his evil inclination, you desire something which is forbidden to you. By your life I shall make you desire what is permitted to you. The rabbis of Caesarea said they actually were forbidden to him. If a private person's vessel used by a private person is forbidden for the king's use, a fortiori, the king is forbidden to use the king's vessels, which were used by a private person. Yeah. And on verse 5, he took longer than the time the king had set for him. I just said that according to Talmud Sanhedrin 49a, Amasa found rabbis who had begun to learn a tractate in the Talmud.
He was righteous, and he got distracted by learning something.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, escape from us on verse 6. In Hebrew, it's hitzil einenu. The word einenu means our eyes, but the verb hitzil is unclear. Septuagint reads, will overshadow our eyes, reading hetzil from tzel, which means shadow, meaning that he will bring great sorrow over them. This meaning is favored by McCarter, following Ewald. Tsumura, however, writes that this elaborate emendation is based on an unnatural treatment of Semitic idioms involving body terms. Instead, he suggested reading to take away one's eye, with the meaning to be stealthy. The Lucianic recension reads, escape from us, a reading accepted by most traditional commentators. Peshitta reads, pluck out our eyes. Targum reads, oppress us, deriving hitzil from the root, tzadik resh resh. Vulgate reads, put us to flight. Anderson writes that these variants may point to an unusual idiom rather than to corrupt text. On verse 8, the second part of verse 8 has been a subject of constant debate in regard to its meaning. Rashi wrote, The sword fell out from its sheath because it was smooth and sharp, and it was not hanging on the side of his thigh, but it was along the width of his loins. Josephus in Antiquity 7284 wrote, "When Amasa approached to greet him, Joab caused the sword to fall of itself out of its sheath, and then lifted it up from the ground." Likewise, Kara writes, "Joab made it as if the sword fell upon itself from its sheath, and he unsheathed it willingly." End quote. McCarter follows Josephus, but writes that, quote, "It is strange that we have nothing in the biblical text to explain how the fallen sword got from the ground to Joab's hand, where it turns up in verse 10. End quote. He notes Klostermann's opinion that Joab had two swords, and renders, "And so for Joab a sword was in his hand under his clothes, and upon him outside he was girded with a sword." He writes, however, that there is no textual support for this reading. Anderson suggested amending the text, reading, "Now Joab was dressed in his tunic, and over it he was girded with a dagger fastened in its sheath at his thigh. Then, as he went forward, it fell out." This reading is attested by Tsumura. On verses 9 and 10, Auld comments, "Amasa dies with a single stroke by Joab, described just like brother Abishai's threat to kill Saul for David in 1 Samuel 26:8. The actual deceit practiced on Amasa by Joab is reinforced by the words used in its description. Even the 6 instances of kissing in the books of Samuel are part of quite different sorts of interaction. 1 Samuel 10:1 has Samuel and Saul, 20:41 David and Jonathan, 2 Samuel 14:33 David and Absalom, 15:5 Absalom and suppliants, 19:39, which is 40, David and Barzillai, 29 Joab and Amasa, but only in this last case is the kiss, reinforced by calling Amasa my brother, positively deceitful. Here, Vatechaz Bazakan, he sees the beard, reassures the key letters of Hechazik he would grasp from 15:5.
I think it still reinforces the point that nothing good comes from boys kissing. Which is the important conclusion.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that the Bible is wrong.
True. Well, you know.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 14, Abel Beth Ma'acha. Hebrew Bible reads Abel and Beth Ma'acha, or Abela and Beth Ma'acha. Likewise, early translations and Kimchi separate the two names. Most commentators, however, read Abel Beth Ma'acha, taking the Vav conjunction to be explicative. It is generally identified with Abil El Kam, some 12 miles or 20 kilometers north of Lake Hule, a few miles from Tel Dan. Anderson writes that Abel may have been associated with the small Aramean kingdom of Ma'acha.
I like Rashi's comment on the bear rights, whatever.
Yeah, I'm about to get to that.
Yeah, good. Say it.
And about Bikrites, in Hebrew, Berim, their identity is unclear. Even Rashi states that he doesn't know who they were. Septuagint reads Kari, which refers to the Bikrites. The Lucianic recension has all the cities, reading Arim. Vulgate reads, and all the chosen men, reading Bachurim. Kimchi wrote that Berim refers to the places adjacent to Beeroth of Benjamin, and Gersondis wrote that Berim were the people of Beeroth. Tsumura notes that Beeri is the name of a descendant of Asher in 1 Chronicles 7:38, and Berim may be a phonetic spelling of a Sandi form. He also notes that Beeri is born by a Hittite, Esau's father-in-law, Genesis 26:34, as well as by Hosea's father in Hosea 1:1. He writes, quote, the association of the name with northern Israel fits the narrative well.
I mean, the Hebrew word is just Berim. There's no like Be'erim. It's like, unless it's a contracted form or something.
Yeah, but it can't. But yeah, I mean, it can be a variant, right?
But is it possible? So which versions change the word to Bikrites to make it seem like the followers of Sheba?
Septuagint.
Oh, I thought you said the Septuagint said Karmi or something like that.
But it refers to the Bikrites.
Okay, and the Bikrites is supposed to be like the followers of Sheva.
I think
because
so.
He's called Sheva the Bikrite, or
I guess.
Or his family.
No. Okay, on verse 16, a wise woman. Chazal in Genesis Rabbah 94:9 identified her with Serach, daughter of Asher, based on verse 19, I am peaceful, Shlomi, and loyal, Emuni of Israel, i.e., Joseph to Moses, or that she was the one who completed the tally of Israel in Egypt. Kimchi, however, questions whether she did live for such a long time. On verses 17 through 19.
I can't remember exactly what the tradition is with Serach, if she's supposed to live forever or if she just lived for like hundreds of years or something.
Yeah. That's weird. That's almost like the giant poison spitting bees or the drinking the blood with 2 different colored straws stuff. You guys have some really interesting additional content on the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, Serach, the daughter of Asher, is like this like legendary figure that pops up in random stories. Like, well, she doesn't actually in the Bible, but it's like, oh yeah, that woman, that's probably her.
She is.
Like, even when she has a different name. Sorry?
I mean, her name does mention her.
Yeah, she's only mentioned, in the timeline of
she's mentioned in Genesis 46:17 and Numbers 26:46.
Yeah, in like a normal age span of when she was born. Yeah. I'm saying like the idea of like, oh, she was alive when Moses was looking for the bones of Joseph, and she told him where to find them. And then it's like, oh, she was alive in the time of Saul, or she was alive the time of David, and it's like, yeah.
It honestly just sounds like women associating themselves with a lineage of wise women, as men have no trouble doing at all. But when it's us, it must be one magical woman.
Or it's men writing that there can't have been multiple smart women living in the land. There must have been one ancient woman who was the daughter
who's immortal.
Yeah.
Okay, on verses 17 through 19, McCarter comments, as Conroy points out, the appearance of the wise woman of Abel in the present chapter reminds the audience of the wise woman of Tekoa in chapter 14. And the connection between these 2 chapters, which is reinforced by a number of verbal parallels, is one of the principal unifying features of the larger story. The masquerading wise woman of chapter 14, who has been told by Joab what to do in 1433, persuades David to set aside the interests of the society as a whole in favor of the interests of one man, and the result is a rebellion. In the present chapter, the wise woman of Abel, who tells Joab what to do, counsels the sacrifice of one man in the interests of the society as a whole, and the result is the prevention of a rebellion. A resolution of the social chaos precipitated by the reception of the fratricide Absalom at court is resolved by the execution of a man who would lead the Israelites in a war against their brothers, compare 1942. On verses 20 to 22, Anderson comments, Joab then makes clear that his aim is not to devastate the city, but to punish Sheba, who had rebelled against the king. In the end, the woman persuades the inhabitants of Abel to agree to Joab's demands. So Sheba is beheaded, and Joab and his army withdraw. The implication is that either Sheba had only comparatively few supporters with him, or he had lost their support. Perhaps both. Stoltz draws our attention to Sheba's rights to asylum in Genesis 19 verses 1 through 11 and Judges 19 verses 22 to 30. But his rights, quote-unquote, may be questioned, since legally he was now a criminal, having lifted up his hand against the king, and therefore it is unlikely that he had any legal claim. Moreover, it is doubtful that in a military situation, such claims would receive any attention.
And unless it was especially one of those sanctuary cities that you could run to, that would be rather problematic. But yeah, it's very much giving, is it not better for you that one man should die for the people than that an entire nation should perish? Which,
so
in brutal times, that's the logic you got to go with.
So I think in the strict Jewish law, it would have, you can't choose one life over the other. So if you say like, kill this person or I will kill you, you're supposed to like give your own life sort of thing. But I think what they're trying to say here, or at least what the rabbis kind of learned from this story was like, it's permissible if you're all condemned to death, but if you give up one person, then people will be spared. It's like it's not one or the other. It's you're all gonna die.
One life for one versus one life for a whole bunch of lives. Also including that one, almost certainly.
Yeah.
And there is an interesting thing with the Targum. So Van Staldijn Solman notes that 2 Targum manuscripts explain how the women achieved their goal, attested also in Genesis Rabbah 94:9 and Kohelet Rabbah or Ecclesiastes Rabbah 9:18. Quote, "Then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, and she said to them, 'He is asking from you 50 men to kill, then he will not ruin the city.' And they said, 'It is given.' And she answered and said, 40, and they said, 'Given.' And she answered and said, 20, and they said, 'Given.' And she answered and said, 10, and they said, 'Given.' And she answered and said, 'A man named Sheba the son of Bikri.' And no sound went out from his mouth while they cut off his head and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his own town."
So they got Shimei to condemn himself by being willing to kill others.
Yeah.
Interesting. Smart.
Okay, on verses 23 to 26, this list is similar to that of 8 verses 18 through 8 verses 16 through 18, with several differences. McCarter notes that many scholars like Knox, Bright, Herman, and Bar-Efrat date this list to the late years of David's reign, with the previous list from its early years. He writes, however, that the 2 lists derive from a single source, and that the duplication is a relic of the literary history of the material. Anderson writes, quote, "A good case can be made for the view that our administrative list is an editorial insertion, while 8 verses 16 through 18 fits more naturally in its canonical setting." On verse 24, Adoniram, in Hebrew Adoram, a renig attested by Josephus in Antiquity 7:293, Vulgate, and Targum. The name Adoniram is found in 1 Kings 4:6 and is attested in the Septuagint, Peshitta, and 1 Hebrew manuscripts, Kennicott 150. Anderson writes that Adoram may be an alternative form of Adoniram, but Mettinger regards the longer form as a later correction, to avoid the offensive pagan element of the name, Hed or Ed. Had or Ad, I don't know. Thus, Adoniram may have been a foreigner. He notes that Mazal considered Adoram as a Canaanite proper name, of which Adoniram is a Hebraized form. This interpretation is favored by Bar-Efrat. The Lusanic recension has Yezedran or something.
It's also, I think in Chronicles it calls him Hadoram.
Yeah, Hadoram, yeah.
I remember Hadara. That was the one that was the smog monster that fought Godzilla in 1975.
Oh my god.
I'm not even kidding.
Someone shared on the Discord that there's like a Mormon like app website thing. Then they have like these like AI generated images for every single character named in the Book of Mormon and stuff like that. And there's like, and then you find all these interesting names that you didn't know existed before. Like, well, someone's favorite was something like Amalikia.
Yeah. Oh, like these nuts.
Oh, biggest.
There's also like
she has a wife in
that's
continental buttock.
That is hands down my favorite name out of the Book of Mormon.
There's also like
when we were reading that's the only way. I'm gonna lick you. I'm gonna lick you.
What about Bofa?
I didn't see that one.
I don't know.
Bofa these nuts.
Yeah. Didn't see that one. There's also, there's besides Mormon and Moroni, there's also someone called Moron, and also another guy called Amoron. And then there's like Tian Kum, And was it teen cum? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was teen cum.
So you take a little cream in there, do you?
Joseph Smith was such a fucking troll. He was such a troll.
There is also Ciantum.
Ciantum? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to be traumatized again.
I hear.
Okay. On verse 24 still. Thank you, Peter. Forced labor, in Hebrew, mas. The reading forced labor is attested by Josephus in Antiquity 7:293 and the Lucanic Recension. McCarter notes that this term first appears in a 14th century BCE letter from a king of Megiddo to the king of Egypt, with reference to forced labor gangs in the valley of Jezreel. He writes that this office was practiced by Solomon and Rehoboam, and even continued through the 6th century BCE. He further writes, quote, captives of war were committed to enforced labor, as we see in Deuteronomy 20:11 and compare 2 Samuel 12:31. And a similar treatment was accorded to the surviving non-Israelite population of Palestine after the arrival of Israel. Joshua 16:10, 17:13, Judges 1 verses 28, 30, 33, and 35. Solomon, especially, is said to have exploited this latter source of labor, 1 Kings 9:21 and 2 Chronicles 8:8, and even to have imposed enforced labor on all Israel, 1 Kings 5:27, which is 13 in the Old Testament. And traditional commentators based on Targum take mas to refer to taxes, since the Aramaic masan both means forced labor and tribute or taxes. Thus, Olam was in charge of the tax collectors.
I'm sorry, the forced labor is slaves. Now, I grant you it was more of a we conquered you, you're our slaves vibe, but I'm definitely getting slaves.
Okay, on verse 26, Ira the Jairite, Irite, if we follow the Hebrew, we have no information regarding Ira. According to Targum, Ira was from Tekoa, and traditional commentators have identified him with Ira, son of Akash of Tekoa, in 23:26. Modern commentators note that Yair was the eponymous ancestor of the inhabitants of Chavot Yair in Gilead, Numbers 32:41, Deuteronomy 3:14, and Joshua 13:30. Although Blenkinsop suggested that Ira was from Kiryath Yarim, the Lucanic Recension has Yehoyada, and the Peshitta has Azza of Yether. And finally, on priest, Chazal in Talmud Eruvin 63a wrote that David would give Ira all his priestly gifts, i.e., Ira was David's private priest. They wrote that this has led to the famine described in chapter 21. McCarter, however, wrote that by David's time, there seems to have been no objection to the king's maintenance of a private priest, even if he was not a Levite. Anderson notes Helsberg's opinion that Ira had taken over the priestly functions of David's sons. He also notes Goldman's proposal that Kohen here may refer to, quote, a civil, not an ecclesiastical minister, end quote. Likewise, Rashi wrote that Ira was an officer and a judge. Tsumura wrote that Ira's role was probably similar to a private chaplain or advisor, similar to the same office as Solomon's priest and king's friend.
Yeah, because we cannot possibly admit that David just had his own magical diviner on the payroll, because that would be idolatry, even though that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, the SBL commentary does specifically say that this would have been a private priest who was not a Levite.
Mm-hmm. Who probably did divination for him, because that's what they do. Read the magic rocks and tell me if I should kill this guy. David, the magic rocks are going to say yes.
The idea that this guy has a private priest just makes me think that somebody's getting anointed every night.
Yeah, he said priest, definitely. Not altar boy.
A lot of rubbing going on.
Who said Christians weren't, innovative?
Yeah.
I'm never going to let the Catholics live that down. Never, ever.
Yeah, did you hear about the Los Angeles Archdiocese agreeing to pay $880 million for, what was it, 130 different victims?
No.
This is my surprised face.
Okay. So are we done with this chapter?
Yeah.
All right. Dare we?
No, we don't dare. I got shit to do.
As do I. I have been walking foster dogs 5 times a day for the last week, and I have to go do that now, including bandage changing, and then I also have to go get somebody a Halloween costume for a thing my wife wants to do somewhere. But anyway,
give the pretty babies kisses for me.
Yeah, and she wants her dog to have a costume too.
Do the Ewok one. You put the Ewok. It's like a teddy bear. You cut out the face, put it in, and then the dog's front paws go through the legs, and it's an Ewok.
Imagine an Akita that looks like a bull mastiff, and imagine that with a lion's mane. That's what she wants.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Speaking of costumes, what are all of your Halloween costumes?
I'm Jewish, so I don't do that.
Okay, that doesn't.
That's not relevant. There's no reason you
at all.
Dress up.
But I guess
I think Halloween is becoming less popular outside of America again. I think it went up and then now it's going down again.
Yeah, is it ever celebrated in Israel?
Yeah, I'm mainly in Tel Aviv because, of course.
Yeah.
Oh,
sure. It's a very gay holiday. And Tel Aviv is very gay, so
Tel Aviv is very gay. It's the only gay town in the
little
list.
Little hint that I used once at work when I forgot to get a proper, just put some extra dark eyeshadow on, red lipstick, and a few drops of fake blood, and then you're a vampire. And anyone else who forgets, you can just smudge your lipstick on them and give them 2 dots of fake blood, and then they're your thrall.
Yeah. And then God's servant in the comments asks, Aaron, what's your Halloween costume this year, friend? It's a funny thing that you say that, Halloween is not popular anymore widely. I remember I was all about Halloween when I was in my pagan state and all that. But I just don't celebrate any holidays anymore, except, oddly enough, for Thanksgiving. Because I like to take stock that, hey, we're still here, we're still breathing, and shit is still a lot better than it was 100 years ago. But, after this next election, we might go back to 100 years ago. So
no more Thanksgiving. But no, a lot of because after in 2016, right, when Trump was elected, a lot of people just they felt no patriotism, which I'm like, good, yeah, don't be a patriot. And then they stopped celebrating 4th of July, and I'm like, yeah, why are we celebrating a birthday anyways for the country? But maybe that's just my own hot takes about American exceptionalism.
For countries with Christmas as a big deal, Halloween is very important. The Goths hold the line. Otherwise, those fuckers would be playing carols in September.
Definitely.
Power to the Goths. Hold the line.
My son still celebrates Halloween. He starts celebrating Halloween in August.
Good. Yeah, no, it's the only fun one. So I'm going as Matt Hardy, and I know that you schmucks have no idea who that is. And my date is going.
Is he a wrestler?
Yes. And then my date is going as Lita. And I also understand you have no idea who that is, but also a wrestler. So
yeah.
I'm not surprised.
And then let me see. Then Matt White adds, Aaron, the price of being able to look after animals is people give you animals to look after. Well, yeah, there's that. And if we're taking the damn dog dressed as a lion, then I've got to figure out what kind of costume can I put on a reticulated python. Devil horn.
I don't know what to tell you.
Wings.
Yeah, that'll work. Okay. All right. I guess let's see. What is it that we did? 20.
Yeah.
Yep. So 21 a week from today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I do.
Everyone, see you in the Discord.
Discord.
Yeah, someone forgot something?
It's better join the damn Discord.
All right. Hasta la bye-bye. Y buenas noches.